It is time, baby. We are going to break into it. This is what you have been waiting for. I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting. We knew that it was back in 2013. Amazing how much happened, how much changed in 2013, just talking about Yahoo. But anyway, in 2013, when Disney bought, also ironically for $4 billion. I think buying out George Lucas is a better investment than Yahoo, unfortunately, or fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it. But we knew that when Disney bought out, the Star Wars franchise, or pretty much bought out Lucasfilm, that's what they bought, because they own Indiana Jones now as well. But they don't own Howard the Duck. Of course, that's a Marvel property. But anyway, when they bought that, they said, look, we're going to be pumping out movies. And we knew it would happen. Like, it'd be dumb of them not to. Of course, in Disney, knowing their MO, they bought Marvel. Wait, so they do own Howard the Duck. What the fuck am I talking about? Holy shit. They could make another Howard the Duck movie, and they could use Lucasfilm to build it. Just like George Lucas did back in the 80s. Right. So Disney owns Marvel, and the Marvel movies, they just keep cranking these things out to the point to where it really is oversaturation. Most people are sick of comic book movies, even though Doctor Strange had just enough uniqueness to it to make it worth a watch. I think really otherwise, the comic book movie is really tired, or at least the comic book movie from Marvel is very tired. I'm very interested to see what Valiant has going on with their a web series on YouTube, like for Ninjak, one of my favorite comic book series of all time. And DC, of course, I think has very interesting things. Wonder Woman is going to be a phenomenal movie. I can feel it. So, but people are sick of Marvel. And this might be a part of the conversation we have here around Star Wars. Because, we knew that they were going to be releasing, they said, we're going to release a movie a year from here into seemingly perpetuity. Starting off with episode 7 of The Force Awakens, which came out last year. And now, just a couple days ago on December 16th, even though I saw it on the 15th, which isn't uncommon for big movies where usually you can catch a midnight showing. Now they're pretty much allowing theaters to do a 7 p.m. showing. It came out and it's Star Wars, it's Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I'll admit that title does not roll off the tongue, and I certainly would have went with something else. Rogue One's a fine title. Just saying Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I would have just called it Star Wars Rogue One and left the episode out of it. So here's the thing with this. So we knew that these movies would come out, be coming out, every year. And of course we have episode 8 coming out next year. It's around the same time. And then following that, we have the Han Solo movie, coming out, which is a prequel, a Han Solo prequel. And of course they won't use the term prequels. I'm going to lay this out. I guess I should just say this right out of the gate. Okay. Is what did I actually think of the movie itself? Well, I'll just call it as I saw it. I thought it was great. I genuinely thought it was a great fucking Star Wars movie. Now, that said, there's so much nuance here, but we've got time to go over it. That said, I wouldn't say it's a great movie. And because there's problems, I think you could look at, say, The Empire Strikes Back, and maybe you couldn't do this. I think, and people talk a lot about this. They talk about the machete order, like what order do you watch the Star Wars movies now if someone's never seen them before and all this, right? And the machete order is you watch 4, 5, 2, 3, and then 6, and you never watch 1. You never watch Phantom Menace. Okay. I think you could get away with just watching 5 and 6 and be like, holy shit, that was amazing. And the reason I kind of say that is I do know that you could watch, I think you could watch Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 3 and never see Star Trek 1 or never even see the television show. And yet you're still like, wow, this is amazing. What the hell am I seeing here? And so I think episode 5 and 6 you can really do that with Empire and Return of the Jedi. You can definitely just watch those and not have seen any other Star Wars. And you can get it. And you can watch it and say, holy shit, that was awesome. And you get enough story to really understand sort of what's going on, partly because also you have, the opening crawl that helps you out, with explaining the story, right? Rogue One you cannot just watch this movie on its own. It's so funny because like, oh, this is a standalone movie. You know, now I know they didn't really mean that as like, you could just go see this and, you know, wow, ooh, ah, you know, this is really impressive. This is a movie that you have to see all of the other movies to understand. And there's a lot of confusion around this film. And I want to talk about that because I mean, this gets into a lot, and we will break down into, more about the movie, but I think there's a lot to say about its overall release and place, in the abstract. So one of the things, in fact, there was an argument about whether or not there was going to be an opening crawl. And again, spoiler alerts, folks. I mean, that's the last time I'm going to say it. There's going to be tons of spoilers here. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, go catch it. There was argument whether or not there would be an opening crawl which is a Star Wars staple. Everything kind of does the opening crawl, almost everything, or something like it anyway. Like even Clone Wars, did something like it. This movie had no opening crawl. And what is such a pity is that this is the singular movie that fucking needed it. Like it needed it so bad, because what was a major concern around this film was that people wouldn't know. You had this catch-22, okay, that I think was going on at the offices at Disney/Lucasfilm. People didn't know, okay, is this a sequel to episode 7? So like, where's Finn and Rey? Like where is everybody? Where's Luke Skywalker and all this shit, right? So that is the argument as to why they didn't call it Star Wars Rogue One. That's why they called it Rogue One, a Star Wars story. That way you didn't get confused into thinking that this was the sequel to last year's episode 7. Okay. That's problematic in and of itself. Now, maybe that's also the reason why they didn't do an opening crawl, because they're like, well, if they see an opening crawl, they're going to think it's a sequel to last year's, which wrong thinking. The opening crawl would have been the thing that would have made it very clear that you are seeing a prequel to the original trilogy and not a sequel to episode 7. That would have made that abundantly clear. Problem comes in though, is that also you couldn't just go out there. Like the easy way to market this thing would be to say it's a prequel. It takes place before A New Hope. But I think also at the offices of Disney and Lucasfilm, they didn't want to say that because the prequels have such a stigma around them, where people, for whatever reasons, hate those movies. And I don't get it, but okay. I mean, I love them. I love all three. And whatever, I guess I understand some of the arguments against it, right? I mean, there are problems with those films, just like there's problems with this one. All right. But I think that they, they're just fine and dandy movies. Okay. But because of that, you didn't want to say that this is a prequel because, you want to stay away from that term because that term has bad connotations. So Disney was really screwed in releasing this, I think, and I've heard from people and I didn't think that this would be a problem. I kind of figured, I was like, no, people will be smart enough. They'll see Darth Vader in the trailers and I, not to infer that they're dumb if they don't. I'm just saying that, they would see in the trailers that Darth Vader's there. Okay. So they know that this is something to do with the original trilogy because Darth Vader's back. That's the only explanation. And they know it's not the prequel trilogy because Darth Vader's here. But no, people were still very confused as to, what is going on, when does this movie take place? Where is Finn and Rey? Like people, and I understand. And what didn't help with any of that was the fact that, and this is going to be kind of the initial, I mean, there's so many great things to say about this movie and I'm going to get into those, believe me, but let's start at the start here, is that this movie does a terrible job of explaining what's going on. In fact, it pretty much doesn't explain really what's happening. I mean, it just doesn't. Your explanation comes, with the opening conversation between Krennic and Galen Erso. It's in bad shape. And that's why I say this movie needed the fucking opening crawl to explain what was happening. And I mean, they really dropped the ball. And honestly, I would have no problem, and I would not blame Kathleen Kennedy, head of Lucasfilm. I would not blame her if she said, okay, when this comes out on Blu-ray, put the opening crawl in. because for the longevity of this film, I think that's going to be, I think that that's just a very, very smart move. Because especially, I mean, when people see this on TV, they're going to be confused as fuck. You know, and so I don't blame anybody for being, I really empathize with anybody that was confused. What the hell is going on in this movie? What is this movie about? Like, I don't get the story. What is happening? When does this take place? Because there's really no clues, you know, unless you looked into it beforehand. And I kind of want to save this second subject for later, but even if you saw the trailers, I think you would be confused when you finally go to see this movie. Reason being is because I think, and we'll talk more about this later, we got a very different film in theaters than what was being shown in the trailers. I'm going to save that subject for later on, but that is a main thrust of something I want to talk about here. And actually, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, I listened to the audiobook in its entirety of Rogue One, which again isn't supposed to come out till December 20th. I'm releasing this episode on December 17th. Okay, I listened to the complete audiobook, and it kind of proves my point. We'll talk about the audiobook as we go along here. And I mean, and there's other evidence for all of that too. So, but that, you know, I do want to start off with that the opening was really bad. Like really bad. Like, it needed that opening crawl. They did not explain things very well whatsoever. And even when, you know, what's funny, like the only way you knew that, like the title shot for the movie was a joke. Like, you have the whole scene with Krennic and Urso and Galen Urso, and you see, you know, where Jyn Erso gets away. And then it just goes to, I mean, it was, and other people have commented about this, and I think they're dead on for it. They said it looks like the opening, kind of the quick title shot that they give where it says Rogue One, you know, with the Starfield and the yellow letters. It looks like somebody made that in iMovie. Like, it's 5 seconds saying Rogue One with this font that just looked so stupid. Like, why not use the Star Wars font? I was baffled at that. That was so weird, especially in the movie posters. They used the Star Wars font. So fucking use it in the movie. Like I said, if they make changes, okay, and maybe this will become a thing because, you know, kind of director's cuts with I mean, those are in extended editions. Those are becoming very popular. Largely, like, say, with DC, which isn't Disney, but, you know, you have the extended cuts of Suicide Squad or Batman versus Superman and all that. Like that's really becoming a thing where there's a difference when it comes to home video. So I very much hope that we get effectively a special edition of this movie for the opening alone. Okay. Because that was really, really bad. I mean, and also the other thing, like, that opening should have taken the time, and they tried to, in a very coy way, explain, like, let's talk about what one of the major plot points of this movie is. Okay. One of the major plot points of Rogue One, again, this whole movie is about getting the Death Star plans for the first Death Star so that, you know, Luke Skywalker can do his trench run and, you know, blow up the Death Star. Okay, spoiler alert there, huh? You didn't know that? Or you didn't know that was how this is all going to end. So this is literally like, this is a prologue to episode 4, to A New Hope. Okay, and it's all about that one line that you got in the you know, kind of the opening text for A New Hope, where it says, you know, rebels stole the plans for the Death Star, blah, blah, blah. And that Princess Leia is, you know, running them and getting Obi-Wan Kenobi, and she's trying to get the plans to the rebels, you know, so that they can launch an attack against the, you know, the terror weapon, the planet killer that is the Death Star. Okay, so that's the plot for the movie. But a major plot device for this whole film are the Kyber crystals. Okay, now how many people, even people that have watched because they've never been mentioned before in the movies, I mean, they're a big part of any of the animated shows like Clone Wars or Rebels. Okay, both phenomenal, by the way. But how many, or part of the books too, how many people know what Kyber crystals are? That even people that have, like, watched the movies religiously, no, they don't know. But they were the Kyber crystals, which are these crystals that they are what power the Jedi's lightsabers. They are what also you find out, and you actually kind of found this out through Clone Wars, through the TV show Clone Wars. That they are what power the, you know, the super weapon of the Death Star, that, you know, the super laser that it has. So that's a huge plot point of this whole film. And yet the only introduction you really get to it is like Jyn Erso's mom, what's her name? Lynn? No, Lyra, right. Yeah, Lyra Erso. Like, she gives her a necklace, and her dad give her a necklace that, has a kyber crystal on it, and that's kind of your introduction to sort of what the kyber crystals are about. I mean, they really don't go into any depth with that. And so if you don't know what kyber crystals are, I mean, like, it keeps coming up over and over again in the movie. Like, or why are the Imperials on Jeddah? Because, there's great mining for kyber crystals there. And all that. Like, it's a huge fucking deal. And so to not have the opening crawl to explain what kyber crystals are, or, to not go into depth in any way about all of that. I mean, what a loss. This is a movie. And I'll explain. Like I said, we're going to get into, because there's so much great shit about this. I loved this movie. Okay. So please don't confuse me with what I'm saying. But again, we're starting from the beginning. This was a movie, kind of the easiest way to explain this is that it is a Star Wars super fans, Star Wars film. And I use super fan in particular. If you listen to Patreon episodes of Sovryn Tech, you know what I mean by super fan. It used to be when you'd say fan, you'd know that it was somebody that read all the books, read all the comics, or, was totally immersed in some kind of fictional universe. Now everybody's a fan of fucking everything. And so you have to say super fan to really differentiate, to understand that, somebody that's really knee deep in this stuff. So if you're a Star Wars super fan, this movie was so for you. I mean, and I am one. I am absolutely a Star Wars super fan. This was a movie. This is the first movie where something that I've complained about, and this is a good and a bad thing, depending on who you are and how you're looking at it. Okay. This is Rogue One is the first movie I've seen where if you did not read the extraneous material, if you didn't read the book, there was a prequel book for this called Catalyst. Okay, which was a great book. Now, I mean, not an awesome book, but it was a great book. It was a very good book as far as Star Wars goes. That went into everything about kyber crystals. It went into Galen Erso's, obsession with kyber crystals. It talked about the relationship between Galen Erso and Orson Krennic, who is kind of the, effectively the primary villain in this, even though you really have three villains. It went into all of that. Okay. And so if you read Catalyst, you would have no question about what is going on in this movie. You'd have zero. Catalyst is effectively the opening crawl that should have been there for Rogue One, just obviously in a very expanded format because it's an entire novel. And again, a very good one. Like it is really, it is a really good novel. And I think but here's the thing is that I've said about this for a while. I was like, no, I want my time, my investment in researching, a fictional universe, reading everything about that fictional universe that comes out about that fictional universe. I want that to pay off. I want there to be that movie where only the super fans really appreciate what's going on and only they really get it. And that's exactly what I got with Rogue One. And I don't mean that to insult anybody that's not a super fan. I understand you don't want to spend the time. Please do other things. That's okay. All right. But this was the time that it really happened. But I think that it's, as much as I love that, it's kind of a bad move because you have so many other people that are going to go see, well, Star Wars is on name. This has got to be awesome. It's not going to be awesome for them. Not that it needs to be, but for it to be the second movie to ever come out, after, effectively, over a 10-year hiatus, you don't want to be doing that kind of specialized film at this point in time. I think you want to prove your chops a little bit better, or you want to make it a movie that everybody can really identify with and can jump on board with by at least putting in an opening crawl. I think that there was a lot of marketing going on for telling people to go read Catalyst because it was a good book. It wasn't the best book ever made for Star Wars, even out of the new canon. Okay. And I think part of the reason that people were so hot about it is because Disney was probably letting some of these venues know, like even some YouTubers and some others. I really think Disney was saying to them, you need to tell people that they need to read this book because they knew what was coming. Okay. That it wasn't going to be, that this was going to be kind of a confusing film. They had to know that it didn't make sense. Because the movie, unless you're a super fan, I mean, if you're a super fan, this movie makes tons of sense. It's awesome. It is wet dreams brought to life. It is phenomenal. Okay. But if you're not, it's rough shape. Now, like I said earlier, how, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, like how I think you could actually watch those two films and it would overall, like, you know, kind of make sense as far as what happened with it. I don't think that you can just watch Return of the Jedi. I think you can watch Empire on its own and be like, holy shit, that was a great movie. I don't think you can watch Return of the Jedi and think the same way, because it's so intertwined with everything that happened in Empire Strikes Back and, you know, even A New Hope, maybe. And, you know, it was saying that, like, this is interesting because I really feel like if the argument has been made that The Force Awakens, episode 7, if that was just a rehash of A New Hope, you know, of episode 4, this was, ironically, based upon its placement, this was a rehash of Return of the Jedi. I really, really think that. I mean, like, the plot was so similar. We got to get the shield down on this planet so that we can get to the plans. We use a stolen Imperial shuttle to get these plans. There was so many things in it that really felt like that felt like Return of the Jedi, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, even the gigantic space fucking battle was easily, and I know others have said this, but I agree, it is easily the greatest space battle you've ever seen next to Return of the Jedi. Like, it is that good. The space battle in the second half of this is phenomenal, and it is in many ways, for everybody, it is the movie's saving grace. Even for the super fans, but certainly for people that are watching, like, what the hell is going on? Like, the space battle is just so intense, so well done, and so nuts. But it's a carbon copy of it. I mean, you even have effectively Admiral Akbar. You know, of course, it's Admiral Raddus instead, who is a really cool character. I really enjoyed that. But I mean, you know, he did everything except say it's a trap. It's a trap. You know, I mean, like if Raddus said that, it would, you know, people would be like, well, holy shit. I mean, you even had, like, what happened in Return of the Jedi, where the Executor, the Super Star Destroyer, crashes into the Death Star. Well, in this one, you have, you know, a couple Star Destroyers crash into the shield generator, you know, around the shield gate, I should say, around the planet, and that kind of brings everything down. Like, like, there are so many notes and cues taken from Return of the Jedi. Like, I think that this was effectively a copy of that. Now, like Return of the Jedi, though, it can't really stand on its own feet. You know, it needs to have understanding of the rest of the lore, the rest of the saga, the rest of the legend. So, you know, that's kind of my opinion on that. And I look forward to seeing, I haven't seen any yet, but I will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if other people kind of pick up on that this was effectively a rehash of Return of the Jedi in a lot of ways. I mean, the space battle in particular, you know, copied it like almost note for note. You know, perhaps the first half of the movie wasn't like Return of the Jedi, but certainly the second half was in a very, very, very big way. So anyway, let's move on to some other points about this, and I guess I'm going to stick with the negatives because when I would start talking about the positives, I really want to ride high on them. This was a movie that even for a super fan, I feel like it left you with a lot more questions than answers. I mean, I felt like the way this movie was getting billed to me was that this was a film where, you know, you were going to get a lot of things explained to you, right? Like, they were going to explain, oh, how did all this happen? I mean, the whole point is this is going to flesh out a certain aspect of the opening crawl for A New Hope. So that infers, that's very implicit. Or very explicit, I should say. It's very explicit that this is going to explain things. And it really didn't. It just left you with a bunch of other questions. Like, you know, you find out about, like, what's Jedha? What are the Guardians of the Wills? Which Guardian of the Wills, now, when I heard them say Wills, actually, when I saw the soundtrack, I listened to the soundtrack that day. That on the 15th, I listened to it and I looked, you know, and I saw the track listing and everything. And actually, I saw the track listing when they leaked it like a month ago. But there was a track called Guardian of the Wills, and I was like, oh shit. Now, if you read the 1976 Alan Dean Foster, even though it was credited to George Lucas, novelization of the first Star Wars movie, at the beginning of that, there is this, you know, there's kind of this intro and it like a prologue where it's supposedly from some kind of, you know, text or something. And the text was written, it says it's from the Journal of the Wills, Wills. And so when I saw, oh, there's the Guardian of the Wills, it's like, oh, this is going to be very interesting. That whole idea of the Wills, you know, George Lucas never went further with it, but it's been tried to get placed into various aspects of the Star Wars saga ever since. You know, certainly the expanded universe and all that. So I'm open to that, but then you never really find out who the Wills are. It says Guardian of the Wills, but the Guardian of the Wills are effectively these people. They're not necessarily Force users, you know, kind of like the various characters like, you know, Donnie Yen's character, Chirrut, and then the other guy there, not Bodhi, Baze Malbus. You know, those two guys are Guardians of the Wills, but they're Guardians of the Wills. They're not Wills themselves. So what are the Wills? And you find out all about this, you know, the city Nijeda, or, you know, Jeddah City, whatever they want to call it. It has a bunch of different words, but the Holy City, obviously, you know, a huge play on Jerusalem, on this moon called Jeddah, which you find out that Jeddah is effectively this, it's like Mecca for Jedi. Okay, you know, it really, you know, when you look at Nijeda, it's definitely designed to be like, it's supposed to hint at Jerusalem and kind of the, I suppose in some ways, the violence in Jerusalem and all that, right? That always happens. So you got that play on that. So this is a very important planet and a very important city, and you have these Guardian of the Wills, but like, you know nothing about this. No one's ever really mentioned Jeddah before. It was in, you know, a Galactic Atlas book, and that's about it. And obviously the name is reference to Jedi. When you read the audiobook, there's some interesting hints that actually a lot of different religions consider Jeddah to be very important, which just plays into the fact that this is the Star Wars version of Jerusalem. Because, you know, in real world Jerusalem, you have, you know, it's split into quarters, right? You have different religions that all, you know, kind of, you know, praise it and glorify it. So yeah, that's the deal with Jeddah. Of course, the Death Star blows it up. So it's gone now. So what are you going to do with it? Like, I think it's pretty obvious that they put it into this movie because it's going to end up getting used in a whole bunch of other shit for, you know, for the Star Wars saga in general. Like I don't think it's a stretch to say that there is going to be in the near future that there's going to be like, you know, a Knights of the Old Republic, like, you know, Jedi stories, Star Wars stories that take place thousands of years, perhaps, you know, before the prequels even. And that Jeddah will play a big part in all that. And then we'll kind of understand that. So that lends an interesting thing is that this movie, Rogue One, might make a lot more sense 10 years from now. Like this movie will introduce a lot of things that you will see the connections to as more movies come out. So this really isn't that much of a standalone. And that's the thing, is that I think a lot of the questions sort of left up in the air in this, they will get answered way down the line. And then this movie will make a lot of sense. I mean, it did a good job, I think, of being placed between episode 3 and episode 4. Like, I think it did a good job of being a bridge between those two, as long as you know both of those movies really, really well. You know, because I mean, at the end of episode 3, what does episode 3 really end on? It ends on the Death Star getting constructed, you know, and there's Tarkin and everything. And so to have, and this is where I guess maybe we could start getting into some of the, you know, some of the good stuff here. The movie really pulled off some things that were very interesting, some very interesting effects that I really enjoyed. One of the best things about this movie was the inclusion of Grand Moff Tarkin. Of course, you know, from A New Hope, played by Peter Cushing, the great Peter Cushing. What they did in this is they pulled off what they did in Tron Legacy. If you ever saw Tron Legacy, which, talk about a great fucking film that can stand on its own, that is one of the best. And actually, I'm a little pissed at Star Wars because I think once Disney acquired Star Wars, they canceled all their plans for turning Tron into a gigantic franchise again. And that's a real shame because that had legs. But, you know, not coincidentally, I think that technology originally, you know, trailblazed in Tron, in another Disney property, came to full fruition in the franchise that ended up superseding Tron, and that being Star Wars. So, you know, where in Tron Legacy, where you had Jeff Bridges, you know, in his character of Clue, they overlaid a young Jeff Bridges over an actor using CGI. So that way the program, as compared to Kevin Flynn, the human actor within Tron, can age. The program that Kevin Flynn created that looked like him could be forever young, you know, would always look young. And so, you know, you had this technology, you know, CGI used that allowed for an overlay of a very young faced, Jeff Bridges over some kind of actor, and then the actor could do all the voicing and everything. So they did this with Rogue One, where you have Tarkin, who is there's an actor there, but then they overlaid the actor's face with Peter Cushing, effectively, like a slightly, perhaps even he looked a little younger. I mean, it worked. Like it looked good. It got the point across, and I think Tarkin being in the movie was absolutely essential, especially since, again, going back to, you really got to be a super fan to appreciate this. The book Tarkin, there's just a book by James Luceno called Tarkin, which is part of the new canon of Star Wars ever since Disney took over and they rebooted the entire canon, is one of the best that they've released. And it is a fan favorite, and people love the character now. So to have him in there just made a ton of sense. It was the right thing to do. And I think doing it that way made sense too, instead of bringing in another actor, because it's going to be fun to watch this movie and then immediately watch A New Hope and just have that whole 4-hour block effectively where, you get this complete story. That would be a lot of fun. So having it look just like, Tarkin, in using CGI, even if it wasn't picture perfect, I think it was the right move. I really applaud them for doing that. So who else did they do that with? Well, I'm going to save that because there's another character that they did that with. As far as what was right with the movie, well, going beyond that, having Tarkin in it, that was the first right move to do. I thought that the action in general, this was definitely a movie it was really the first Star Wars movie that was really aimed at adults. Okay. And more so, I mean, Empire Strikes Back, I think, was kind of aimed at adults as well. And I really think Return of the Jedi was, up until Rogue One, I think Return of the Jedi was the darkest Star Wars movie. And don't talk to me about the Ewoks. Don't even complain about them. Do you understand how badass those things were? I love the Ewoks. They were cooking human beings. Did you miss that part of the movie? These are not Care Bears. Okay. They were literally putting Han Solo over a goddamn fire and they're going to roast him. Please give me okay, I guess you normally put that in kids stuff where they cook human beings. Stop. Oh, I never understand the hate for the Ewoks. Those are badass fucking creatures. Now, I mean, if you're going off the cartoons, like the animated series or even the Ewok movies, okay, maybe that's a little bit different. But if you're just basing your experience of the Ewoks, which is what most people have, on Return of the Jedi, they eat humans. Anyway, this is definitely, the darkest of the bunch and, easily the most adult film of the bunch. But it was, I will give this, it was odd. And actually someone else, a good friend, pointed this out in that, there's almost no sexuality, in the movie itself. You get practically none, which is strange because there's definitely a love interest between Jyn Erso and Cassian, the character played by Diego Luna there. And even at the end when, the Death Star fires off and everybody's about to die. Yeah. Spoiler alerts, folks. Everybody dies. Almost everybody dies. K2SO, all the major characters that you saw in the trailers gone. There was a point where they could have kissed and I was just this is it. This is where Disney, they'll show all the violence in the world and they won't allow for one little fucking kiss. God damn it. And it really, that sucks. In some of the new canon Star Wars books, you are getting some degree of sex and sexuality, but on film, yep, they wouldn't let it go there. And I don't know why they wouldn't let that happen. Especially because now this leads into something else. So yeah, so the space battle. All right. I just want to say that quick. The space battles were great. The action was tremendous. All the new vehicles, I could spend a whole episode talking about all the new vehicles. I thought the U-Wing was awesome. I thought the new TIE fighters were real, the TIE Striker or whatever, all those. And there was even another one. I think it was the TIE Raven that you didn't know about, but if you look closely, you see it. That was really cool. A lot of that stuff was really, really cool. But I want to get into real quick here, before I go on with the rest, that again, and the acting was fine. The story largely was fine. Again, you have to be a super fan to understand what's going on. But if you are, this is awesome. There's so much you get to see come to life. That was just really, really cool. Everything happening on Yavin 4 was great. Mon Mothma was awesome. To have Jimmy Smits come back as Bail Organa was great. In fact, I heard the collective like gasp when he came out of the shadows on Yavin 4, on the Rebel base. It was like, ooh, and General Dodonna's there. I mean, you got all these great cues. That was really, really fun. But talking about the tone of the film. So I want to touch on this while I have time. Like I said earlier, I think we ended up seeing a very, very different movie than what was originally, filmed, even, because there was a lot of controversy around the reshoots. Like, this was a big deal, is that, there was the saying, they're going in for reshoots, and they're apparently really extensive reshoots. That was the rumor that went around. And then it got proven as fact. Yes, there were extensive reshoots. Another director came in, all these different people, got involved. What the hell is going on with Rogue One? And, the theory going was that Disney did not like the darkness and the tone of the film, even though, like I said, the movie that I just saw was still pretty dark. They didn't like it, and so they wanted, really crazy reshoots. Frankly, and people were, be it various, movie professionals or, critics or whatever, were kind of poo-pooing, saying, look, no. The reshoots, this happens with every movie, which is true. Almost every movie has reshoots. It's contractually obligated. That happens all the time. Okay. There's nothing to worry about here. I don't think that there's a problem. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. That was kind of what people were saying. I always felt that was, and they would make fun of people that said that there's a problem with the reshoots, that the reshoots are saying that Disney is getting in and they didn't like the movie that they were handed. I was a little annoyed that people were getting downright insulting with people concerned about the reshoots, and that they were just kind of writing them off, because it's not like people were just complaining about the fact that there were reshoots. The concern is that the rumor was that Disney didn't like the tone, that there was something wrong with it. It was too dark or something like that. And that the movie wasn't working for them, and that they were going to Disney-fy it. And I think you kind of got that. Like, there's parts of me that feels like Disney got its hands in and said, we gotta lighten this up, or, we can't let it go this direction, or we can't let it do this. Now, my evidence for a lot of this, there's quite a bit, is that we got a very different movie than what was originally filmed and planned. My evidence is that, first off, when you watch, there's 3 major trailers for Rogue One. Okay. There was the initial one that came out like over the summer, I guess. Then there was the other one that we got, I think, in September. And then there was the one we got at the end of October, beginning of November. Okay. And then there was a bunch of little trailers too, but there was 3 major trailers that we got. In the first trailer, Jyn Erso, okay, played by Felicity Jones, which she did a great job, was this really like sarcastic, very confident. Like, she gives that whole I rebel thing, it's like, you're a bunch of rebels, aren't you? I rebel, like she was really like a badass. You felt like there was this real badass character being delivered there. And I thought that was cool, especially for a female lead. I think that's wonderful. In fact, there's a story I've got to get to about the alt-right in Rogue One. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get to that. I could have done this whole episode as a review. Maybe I'll do it for Patreon content. Because a lot of people are saying, this movie's feminist propaganda and all that. I think there was a point where, honestly, so what? Even if it was, who gives a shit? What, you don't like that there's a female lead? Please give me more. Oh, this is the one thing you can give Disney a lot of credit for, right? They have quadrupled the female population of the Star Wars universe inside of 3 years. Good. We always wanted more women in Star Wars. Please give us more women in Star Wars. These idiots complaining as feminist propaganda, just go away. You're ruining it for the people that it actually matters to, that being the super fans and whatever else. But regardless, I could say a lot more nasty words, but I'll withhold from that. I want to get to my point. Okay. So the tone within which Felicity Jones was delivering the character of Jyn Erso in that first trailer was, and I knew this beforehand, and I think I mentioned this in some Patreon episodes, that I was a little concerned, because I felt like so, at first she's talking like very confidently, in a very badass tone, lots of sarcasm and all this. Like, even when she says, when, like, even I think it might have been the second trailer where she's like, "May the force be with us." Like, she said it like it was almost a pejorative. Like, it was just a lot of heat in the way she said it. And now she says it like, "May the force be with us." You know, like they tone her character way down. Or even like, "We have to go find my father." Like, it turned into, you know, "We have to find my father. We have to save him." Like, it turned into a very desperate and shaky voice. So I think that they significantly changed, you know, a lot about this film, and that a lot of the reshoots were Felicity Jones reenacting her character. And now my evidence for a lot of this, you know, now first off, why would they redo that? Well, there is the argument that there is the big argument against The Force Awakens that the character of Rey, played by Daisy Ridley, of course, was what they call a Mary Jane. It was a character that could just do everything. It was just so awesome. And that they were overcompensating because it was a woman, and they wanted to make her this really badass character that could do anything. Okay. Or Mary Sue, sorry, not a Mary Jane, Mary Sue. And I could believe that they were concerned that they were going to have another Mary Sue on their hands, you know, that Disney was, with Felicity Jones, who was just going to be this badass character that could do anything. And so they toned her down to make her a little more frail. I could believe it. I mean, and honestly, look, it didn't stop shit. You know, you still have people, you know, you still have the alt-right complaining about it. You still have all these other people saying it's propaganda for women and blah, 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 blah. Which, I mean, oh, how terrible that there's propaganda for women. Oh, geez, we don't want that, do we? Oh, please give me more. Women are wonderful. So, but anyway, so I think that might have played a part in it, or maybe they didn't want to have maybe Disney just didn't want a female character that was just that badass, you know, and didn't have kind of the joking and smiling attitude that, say, Daisy Ridley would still pull off with the character of Rey, right? So I think it was very different as far as that goes. Now, so a lot of the scenes that we know from the trailers weren't even in the film. Okay. And that also lends to the idea that, that there was, that the reshoots were really extensive, and that we ended up with a very different film than we were getting from the tone of the very first trailer. Okay. And before I mention that, I also want to say the other piece of evidence is that Felicity Jones, perhaps more so than any of the other actors, we do know how much she got paid, and it is in the 7 figures. Like, she was highly, highly paid, and she probably made, and my guess is she got paid the 7 figures because the way her character was being portrayed got completely redone, and she had to effectively reenact the entire movie. Like, I mean, that's kind of my theory on that. Also, there's that idea that in her contract, she actually had a contractual obligation for another film. I mean, is there the chance that somehow she survived what the Death Star did to the planet Scarif? I don't think so, but but maybe, you know, or maybe, I don't know what they're going to do with that. But I mean, that could just be, you know, like, yeah, just in case we need you for another film, or if you're going to do a flashback sequence or something, we kind of want you here. And hey, there you go. So I don't put much stock in that, but the amount of money that she made compared to the rest of the actors, yeah, I think there might be something, to say to that. Now, as far as like the I Rebel line isn't in there. There's a few others. The big scene that wasn't in there, that I think a lot of people thought was really badass, that was in, or that you saw in the trailers but didn't end up in the movie, was when she is going on this catwalk, and a TIE fighter comes up. Okay. And she's like facing down this TIE fighter. That was not in the film. And apparently what happened is effectively they just kind of removed it. Okay. And they just kind of redid the scene a little bit, the timing of the scene a little bit, because what happens is supposedly, now this is backed up by the audiobook, even though the audiobook, you know, could have been edited up to the last minute. A lot of this movie was being made up to the last minute. That's a key point to keep in mind here, is that's how much they were concerned about what this film was portraying, and putting out there, is that it was, I mean, of course, the original Star Wars, you know, episode 4 back in 1977 was also being edited up until like the day that it got sent off to the very first theater in May of 1977. So not outlandish for a Star Wars film, certainly. Okay. But this one was I think, you know, like really extensively being recut. So anyway, so supposedly the reason that TIE fighter scene got taken out was because what was going to happen is this TIE fighter would show up and an X-Wing would swoop in, blow it up, and move on. Okay. And then, you know, Jyn would finish up what she was doing about sending the plans to the Rebel fleet above. On Scarif. And now in the novelization of Rogue One, that is exactly what happens. Like they still leave in that the TIE fighter comes up and then X-Wing shoots it down. The claim that they took it out of the movie is because like there was already just a scene before that where it would have been too repetitive for another X-Wing to blow up another TIE fighter throughout the whole thing. I think that's kind of ridiculous. But that is the claim. And like I said, in the audiobook and the novelization, that scene is still there. Where the TIE fighter kind of shows up. So that's kind of the mystery around that. But again, it does all lead to that this was meant to be a very, very different film. Personally, I would believe that scene maybe originally, like Jyn was going to do something so badass that would take out that TIE fighter. And they just took that scene out because again, they didn't want Jyn Erso to be a Mary Sue, another Mary Sue character, which even if it was, I don't care. Let it be, So there's other things too. Like in the audiobook itself, you get more of Jyn Erso being this very confident, badass character, which does not portray itself on screen. Not that Felicity Jones did a bad job. She's a great actress. She did awesome. Okay. But the tone of even the novelization is significantly different from, you could say it's book to movie, but it's significantly different from what you ended up with in the film itself. So I really have the sense that there is an incredibly different version of this film out there. Maybe one day we'll get to see that. But it's out there and it's probably a much better film too, even though this film is great. But I think that I've been claiming for a while on Sovryn Tech, I've been saying, and to friends, I've been saying that there's the potential that this could be the greatest Star Wars movie of all time. I think somewhere in this movie is the greatest Star Wars movie of all time, but that got left on the cutting room floor. It's still a great one. After I watch it a couple times, I might even put it right under like Return and Empire. Like I could see this being my number 3. So in fact, right now I'll probably rank it at number 3 as far as being the best. It did what I wanted it to do. I think it does enhance greatly Episode 4. In a big, big way. So that's a huge plus. I think that's wonderful. There's so much Star Wars goodness in this. There's so much fan service in this. I want to touch on some of that too. Like one of the really cool things was, I'll tell you, this was awesome, was Vader's castle. And then I got to talk about the ending. We're going to go into a little bit of overtime here probably. Okay. But one of the cool things was Vader's castle, which not a new idea in that there's a point where Krennic, the character of Krennic, goes to, which he did fine, by the way. I know some people are complaining that he wasn't like a baddie. He wasn't enough of a villain, but he was a villain dealing with other villains, that being Vader and Tarkin. So he did a good job of playing kind of the foil to both of them. I thought he was fantastic. Though even if you read Catalyst and even if you read the Rogue One novel, you get a lot more of Krennic and a lot more of his brilliance. Like in the novel of Rogue One, not Catalyst, but of the actual movie Rogue One. There's a point where he says, he's thinking to himself and he says, wow, what's going on here? He says, my feeling has always been that how does he put it? He says something to the effect of, if the battle has started, then something has already gone wrong. Like saying that you should never have to go to war. Like you're fucking it up if you have to actually fight. And I thought that was like a really cool comment and like definitely leads into how this character thinks in all this. So the book really fleshes out Krennic a lot, and you definitely appreciate him a lot more when you both books, Catalyst and the novelization, do that. So anyway, but Darth Vader's castle, that was great. And yes, it is on Mustafar. If you were wondering what planet is that on, it is Mustafar. Now, the idea of Vader having a castle is not new. Like Ralph McQuarrie did concept art for Empire Strikes Back, where they would have shown off a castle for Vader. Of course, it was more like on Mustafar, as you saw it in the movie, was kind of a desert planet, so it fit there. So they went with kind of McQuarrie's sketch. They just happened to put it onto Mustafar. But Vader also had, there was, what was it called? Bast Castle in the old expanded universe, not the new canon, which was on the planet Vajun. And, this was like the castle had like its own turbo laser and all that shit. It was really badass. But very similar in concept, where there was like a volcano, like there's lava around and all this. It was a really, really cool idea. So when I saw the instant, because they didn't want you to know what it was, and which was unique in the movie, because in the movie, every time they go to a different planet, they would tell you what the planet was underneath, which was also That's very new for a Star Wars movie. Uh, and I think that it actually lends to some problems with storytelling, because Star Wars has never needed to do that before. You always had a really good idea of what planet you were going to, no matter how many planets you went to. And yeah, I don't want to get stuck on that just yet. So anyway, Vader's castle, they don't tell you what planet it is, and they kind of leave it open. In the novelization, it is very clear that it's Mustafar, and other people have confirmed that already. But as soon as they showed the castle and lava coming out of it, I instantly, I turned to Stephanie and I said, "Oh my God, it's Vader's castle." And I thought that was great. What a great plot point. And that was, so, hopefully we can get more explorations of that, but that was really, really cool to see that. Of course, it's not on Vajun. Again, it's on Mustafar. I thought that was awesome. There's a lot to explore as far as that goes, and I'm sure it will get explored in future whatevers, movies, comics, you kind of name it, even though the Darth Vader comic has kind of ended, or has ended, and not a bad little run. But that was really cool to see that in it. And again, also, Vader's castle, I mean, that wasn't even, they originally planned, there's concept art for The Force Awakens for episode 7 that had Vader's castle in it. So you might see that come back in episode 8 or even episode 9. That might be a big part of it, because it was originally supposed to be part of The Force Awakens. So that was cool to get an introduction, to that in this movie. That's what I'm saying, is that I think in the future, this movie, Rogue One, is going to make a lot more sense, and is going to have a lot more, is going to have a lot more weight as more movies and more things come out over time. So that was really nice. Some of the things I wanted that actually weren't in the movie, and then I'm going to get into some of the Easter eggs that were in it. I really wanted, I wouldn't have complained if, and maybe they're saving this for Star Wars Rebels. But I wouldn't have complained if you got to see how they acquired the X-Wings in this. That would have been a fun plot device to go over, that they just didn't do. But whatever, because when you read the book, Mon Mothma, which that's the other thing, there wasn't enough Mon Mothma in this movie. I wanted a lot more, and there was probably a lot of scenes with her. In fact, we know there are other scenes. But again, in changing tone, they put them on the cutting room floor. I really would have enjoyed seeing more of her, but in the book, she talks about the importance of the X-Wings and all that. Wow, without them, we wouldn't be much of anything. So maybe they'll save that for Rebels. I don't know. The other thing I wanted really that this film didn't get into, was Alderaan. I was really hoping to see a lot more Alderaan in this movie, and we didn't even get any of it. I mean, we got to see Bail Organa, which was great, though we already knew, because there was that photo leaked where it showed it showed Jimmy Smits in it. But yeah, I would have loved a lot more Alderaan again. And I would have loved a lot more explanation on a lot of things, Jeddah and all that. Again, there's probably going to be kind of a Knights of the Old Republic series made at some point, I would imagine, be it CGI or, live action, that will talk a lot more about Alderaan and Jeddah. I would imagine, in the future here. So, all that's kind of coming on the way, but speaking of Jeddah, I just want to mention some of the Easter eggs that were there. Kind of the first one was, you got to see from A New Hope, you got to see Dr. Evazan and Baba, which were the guys that get in the argument on the Mos Eisley Cantina with Luke and Obi-Wan ends up slashing them down. Effectively, they bump into Jin, or Jin bumps right into Dr. Evazan. And, it's the guy that, "You'll be dead." That guy bumps right into him, and Baba's right next to him. So that was a nice little touch. Seeing Red Leader and Gold Leader during the space battle above Scarif was, that was really cool. Okay, so it wasn't necessary. And I did feel like it kind of pulled me out of it, because you knew. So first off, you could hear, before they even showed Red Leader and Gold Leader, in their X-Wings or in their Y-Wing, respectively, you heard dialogue, you heard battle chatter, comm chatter. And I was like, wait a minute, I know that voice. They're using voices from A New Hope, for these guys. And then finally you show them, but it sort of took you out. It looked really different when they took a shot from, of Gold Leader or Red Leader from A New Hope, in it, to see, to show them off. I mean, it was cool. I would have done it. I'd do it in a heartbeat. I don't have a problem with that. And in fact, John Knoll, who was behind largely writing and quite a bit of this movie, it seems, John Knoll is the guy that did a lot of the CGI updating on the special editions of the original Star Wars trilogy. In fact, during the Battle of Yavin from A New Hope, he inserted himself into one of the X-Wings. And so for him to want to like try and include more about the Battle of Yavin, yeah, I could see that. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if he slapped himself in one more time, in one of those X-Wings and you just didn't realize it was him. But yeah, so that was fine. That was kind of cool to sort of get that continuation. Of course, ultimately we know both Gold Leader and Red Leader are going to die. It is interesting that Red 5 is in this movie, but it's not Luke Skywalker. Of course, Red 5 was Luke Skywalker's, call sign in A New Hope. He dies. He's the one that crashes into the shield as it closes back up. So that's why Luke comes in and, oh yeah, you can be Red 5 because we lost Red 5 in our last little skirmish. So that made sense. Which also lends to that some of that fleet that is attacking, over the planet at the end there gets away, not just the Tantive 4. And by the way, it is, as far as I know, by all audiobooks that I've heard it mentioned in, it's not Tantive 4, which is what I thought it was always pronounced as. It's Tantive 4. So the Tantive 4 gets away. And that, I definitely, why don't we end, okay, before I end with the ending, which has to do with the Tantive 4, I kind of gave that, you saw the movie. I'm not giving anything away. But it was really cool that in that Rebel fleet that we were just talking about, the Ghost was there from Star Wars Rebels, the old VCX 100. As far as I know, that is confirmed, that is absolutely the Ghost. And also you get to see Chopper on the Rebel base, which is the R2, it's not an R2 unit, but effectively the droid, the astromech droid from Rebels. You get to see him, which I thought was a nice touch. And then there is a mention on Yavin 4, on the Rebel base, there is the mention of General Syndulla, which is a question whether or not it was Cham or if it was Hera. Of course, Cham is Hera's dad, both from Ryloth. And I'm going to guess it was Hera, just based upon like kind of how the movie is portraying the Rebel Alliance as being sort of a splintered thing, and Cham Syndulla would be off doing his own thing. So I don't think General Syndulla would have been Cham there. So that's cool. And this does take place at some period after Star Wars Rebels, or at least the Rebels that we've seen so far. So that was nice. Of course, R2-D2 and C-3PO are there. Vader's castle we mentioned, and of course there's the mention of Obi-Wan. Some people talk about how like one of the codes was of black saber, and some people wonder if that's a reference to the dark saber. I don't think so. The dark saber is this like ancient evil lightsaber. It's a long story that I won't go into right now. You do get to see the blue milk in the film. Yeah, that was cool at the very beginning when Jyn is a child. You do get to see that. So anyway, lots of little Easter eggs in there, and I'm sure there's plenty more that I'll notice as I go on. But getting all the Rebels stuff in there was really cool. In fact, you see the Ghost a few times, and I thought that was just a nice touch, to mix that in. So, which again leads to the fact that, look, if you're a Star Wars super fan, there is a lot to take in here, and there's a lot of things that, like, it's really cool to finally see, in action, like the Hammerhead ships, or the Hammerhead cruisers, right? Now, these were things that were originally from Knights of the Old Republic, which makes me also think that, yeah, we're going to see a lot of things get fleshed out with Knights of the Old Republic, because they're obviously looking in that direction. The Hammerhead cruisers, well, first off, those came from, and that's the one that rams into the Star Destroyer and then jams that Star Destroyer into the other Star Destroyer, which is fucking badass. I'll tell you, that space battle was so good. But the Hammerhead cruiser, okay, it was originally, I think it was designed for West End Games. Like, it was a role-playing thing, which is great that became a thing. But then it got used in Knights of the Old Republic in the comic book for the Sith War with Exar Kun and, Ula Keldroma when they're working with the Mandalorians and all that. It's used in that, but all that's not canon anymore. So, but it did get used in season 2 of Rebels in the episode with Princess Leia, which was one of my favorite episodes, because as it stands right now, Princess Leia is probably my favorite. I mean, since The Force Awakens, really, and maybe a little bit before, Princess Leia has probably become my favorite character in the whole saga. She's just so cool. So anyway, the Hammerheads, that was kind of the plot of that one episode with Princess Leia in Star Wars Rebels, was stealing these Hammerhead cruisers. And so to use them finally, awesome, great, good. That was perfect. That was just another very, very nice touch. All right. And so before I get to the ending, and we'll talk about the ending, and then we'll wrap all this up. Okay. The character of Saw Gerrera. This is another one where it leads to my idea that there's a very different version of this movie out there with a very different tone, because the Saw Gerrera we got, played by, of course, the great Forrest Whitaker, was like, I mean, there was nothing special, nothing, like he didn't have that intensity that you saw in the trailers. It just wasn't there. And what a shame. I mean, maybe it was a good thing. I don't know. Maybe they didn't like how Forrest Whitaker was delivering stuff, but like that whole line of, what will you do when they break you? What will you become? You know, like that wasn't even in the movie. Like that was gone. So Saw Gerrera, of course, is the character originally from the Clone Wars. There was a 2 or 3-parter from one of the seasons of the Clone Wars that he was in, where he's this, very young rebel and his sister dies and all that. But then also he gets mentioned in Bloodlines. They talk about what his group is called the Partisans. That was his rebel group, which is effectively what you see in Rogue One. So that was, Saw Gerrera, being in it, that's okay, but like he really doesn't forward anything. And even in Catalyst, he's not really in the prequel novel for Rogue One. He's not in it till like the end. And so I don't know. I'm kind of wondering, like, what was the purpose of this? Like, it feels like the purpose of Saw Gerrera was removed, within whatever version of the film we ended up with that was in theaters, that's in theaters right now. So yeah, take it or leave it. It just doesn't do anything for me. And I think it was meant to, and it just doesn't. So that was, whatever, Saw Gerrera. So now what really made this movie? Of course, the space battle made everything. The second half of this film is fantastic. The first half of this movie, if you read the audiobook, is great. But you got to know everything that's going on. It's all moving so fast, you get no explanation about what all these places are that they're going to, as to where the book at least gives you a little something extra as to like, okay, why is this like in the middle of what appears to be an asteroid field? Why is this? Why is that? Okay, so like kind of the perfect movie would be if the first half was like the audiobook and then the second half was like the movie, because the book actually disappoints when you get towards the ending because it just doesn't display or describe as well what exactly happens at the end. And this is where, in fact, at the end in the book, it's the epilogue, which is hilarious because I've had this complaint about the Star Wars movies that, or not the Star Wars movies, about the Star Wars books, that the books, you really don't have to read them except for the last chapter. Like all the cool shit, anything that matters, anything that has any weight on the Star Wars universe at large, always happens in the last chapter. This is also true with Rogue One, because the best part of this movie is the epilogue of the book. And of course, the last, 10 whatever minutes of the movie itself. And that is when a third Star Destroyer appears, against the Rebel fleet, and Darth Vader enters the picture. And Darth Vader boards, and Darth Vader just like, there's this scene where he just goes nuts and he just wipes out like tons of these rebels, with his lightsaber, he's force throwing them, force choking them, slashing them all over the place. It was just a badass scene. Even Stephanie was like, wow, that was awesome. And the music's good at that point, all that just shines through, and it's really, really good. And then, like he's kind of standing on the ledge, sort of in the vacuum of space, effectively, looking down as the Tantive 4 escapes with the plans, because one of the guys slides it through the door, to another rebel soldier, and they run away and they get away. And which leads, so Rogue One ends like literally minutes, or minutes, if not hours, before the opening of episode 4, which is a great move. That was the right thing to do. I think that was great. And what's really great is that one rebel that grabs the plans, instantly on the Tantive 4, runs up to someone in a white dress and hands it to her, and camera pans around, and there's Princess Leia looking, obviously it was the same thing they did, like I described earlier with Tarkin, where it is an actress there, but then they superimposed, a CGI face of Carrie Fisher onto her. And she just gives the one line, they ask her like, what is this? And she says, hope. And it was so good. Movie ends. Perfect ending. The ending of this movie made the whole thing really worth it. It was so great. There's so much to love about this movie. The style, everything about it, it was really good. It's a great Star Wars film. It really is. And I love it. And like I said, I'm putting it right now. I'm putting it at number 3 on my list. So it goes my list: number 1, Return of the Jedi; number 2, Empire Strikes Back; number 3, Rogue One is right underneath. It is that fucking good. So yeah, I'm bringing up a lot of this stuff because I don't think a lot of people are going to take the time, to be willing to kind of lay out their critiques. It's a great movie, but it admittedly has its issues. A lot of them having to do with, if you're not a Star Wars super fan, this movie isn't going to mean a whole lot. In fact, it's going to be downright confusing, and potentially even boring for you. So now I want to take one last minute to talk about one of my favorite parts of any movie, and that is the score, okay, the soundtrack. So here's another thing where you get the idea that, ooh, this is a very different movie, because just a couple months ago, or maybe it was I don't even think it was 3 months ago. Originally, you were going to have Alexander Desplat was going to be the composer for it wasn't going to be John Williams. We always knew that. Eventually, John Williams does have to stop, as sad it is for me to admit as well. But Alexander Desplat was originally going to be composing this. And as far as we know, he might have done a full score. I'd love to eventually hear that. But then, on the 11th hour, and with only 3 weeks to compose an entirely new score for a Star Wars movie, they drop him and they call up Michael Giacchino, who is one of my favorite. He is the greatest, as far as new blood composers out there. He is the best. I've sung his praises over and over again with what he does with Star Trek, with what he did with Speed Racer. I mean, there's a laundry list of movies that he has just done amazing work with, and he's worked with J.J. Abrams all the time. So not a shock that he would get included, or he'd be first up. In fact, I really think he's going to end up being kind of heir apparent to John Williams as far as scoring Star Wars movies goes. Now, I listened to the soundtrack before the movie came out. I thought the soundtrack was fantastic. I thought it was really, without the movie, standalone, it was really good. You can listen to it. It's exciting. Within the movie, a lot of people are complaining that it doesn't work. I thought it worked fine. And in fact, some of the themes, especially the suite versions, SUITE, on the album itself of the soundtrack are really good, like Jin's suite and all that. It's beautiful music, new cues that could get used across the Star Wars universe. I think the complaint people really had isn't that Michael Giacchino did a bad job. I mean, most people admit, boy, it sucked that he only had 3 weeks. And I mean, it's amazing what he came out with. Okay. But the concern is that they should have been using, so there's so much Imperial stuff, and so much Rebellion, they should have been using a lot of older John Williams cues of music, a lot of old samples of John Williams. Like the Imperial March should have been played nonstop. Well, I'll tell you this, if you listen to the audiobook, they do use all that old music, and maybe that's part of why the audiobook felt so good. Listening to it, because you're picturing the action and you're getting that classic music, including the Imperial March quite a bit. But yeah, I agree with them that I would have liked a lot more Imperial March in the movie, but I don't think that the music was a problem. And I think the soundtrack stands on its own as fantastic. It is a better soundtrack by a long shot than The Force Awakens. And really, Rogue One in every way, shape, or form is eons superior to The Force Awakens. It is a much better Star Wars film than The Force Awakens maybe could even dream of being. It is that good. And the music beats it. A lot of the story around it beats it. And within it, it's really good. But again, you kind of got to be that super fan to appreciate it. Anyway, I'm running way into overtime, and I have places to be. So I think I covered pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I'm sure there's a lot more. I did have that article about the alt-right and Star Wars. Maybe I'll save that for, I don't know. I'll save it for a Q&A or something for Patreon, because it got sent to me by somebody, that I know is a patron. So anyway, there you go. Do see it. If you're a super fan, do see it, but do not get mad if somebody says, what the fuck was that all about? And don't think they're stupid. This is a movie that did not explain itself well, very, very, at all. It just did not explain itself. And I'm not saying it needed to. I actually like the fact that you have to know your shit to see this and to really get all that's going on. I like getting that payoff for being a super fan, but be respectful of people that aren't, because so they'd have to consume so much content, I think, to get this. I think even if you're a little more than a casual fan, you can still get what's going on and maybe you can enjoy it, but you really take this movie in when you're a super fan. And I personally, I love that. And I love the movie. I think it was fantastic. There's so much to like about it, so much to enjoy, a lot to critique. And I want to see one day, I want to see that other film. I want to see the real Rogue One. I definitely think we ended up with a very different movie than we were getting sold in the trailers. And I'm just going to make this comment quick. Okay. Is that, do trailers have to portray, do lots of movies do this where there's something in the trailers that's not actually in the movie? Of course. It happened with The Force Awakens. It happens with all kinds of films. There's no doubt about that. Okay. But that has to stop happening for a lot of reasons, especially with Star Wars films, because people pick this stuff apart. And, I mean, like the trailer Star Wars should be able to stand on its own without doing a bunch of trickery in the trailers to get people on board with it. And the last thing, yes, K2SO is the best character in the movie. That everybody's already saying that, and it's because God damn it, it's true. It's really something, because a lot of the other characters, admittedly, you have a hard time getting invested in. But if you read Catalyst, you get a lot more of that. And of course, if you read the audiobook, you can definitely get into a little more depth with some of the characters. Like Donnie Yen's character was really cool and all that. And I mean, there's a lot of places that this is going to go. Disney is really taking the time while the veneer of new Star Wars, while the sheen is still on, they are not the veneer. While the sheen is still there and fresh, they are definitely doing a lot of setup that people can look back on. And I get it, and I think that's great, but I think it wears on the patience of people that aren't super fans. So, and I just want to be sympathetic to that. So go see it. Great movie. I loved it. I mean, I absolutely loved it. I will be seeing it many times over and over and over again, just like I did with Force Awakens. I've seen that already more times than I can count. I will memorize it, and I will start using quotes from it because there's some funny shit in it. Like when, well, I won't, never mind. I won't spoil at least that part if you still haven't seen it. Let's just say it has to do with hoods on the head, but so that's enough for this week. That's enough Sovryn Tech. I went way into overtime. I'll see everybody on the other side. We'll get back to some more normal episodes here in the very near future. Like I said, see you on the other side.